You really stand there all day in a funny hat and pretend you're guarding something. Whoopi Goldberg's laugh echoed across the studio as the audience joined in. Come on, it's 2025. Aren't we done with this royal cosplay? The royal guard didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, composed, unreadable. And when she pushed one insult too far about outdated traditions, his response left the entire studio silent. What did he say that even shut down Whoopi herself? First, hit that subscribe button and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get into it. Lance Corporal Garron Vale had never stepped on a talk show set in his life. Truth be told, he hadn't stepped into much of anything outside barracks, royal courtyards and ceremonial duty since he first enlisted at 19. Now 32 and respected across the regiment, Garron stood outside Gate 17 of JFK Airport, wondering how exactly he'd let the Palace PR team talk him into this. Just a short segment on The View, they'd said. 5 minutes of smiles. You'll represent the values of the household division. Discipline, grace, continuity. Americans love the uniform. He didn't feel particularly graceful, hobbling slightly on a boot-sheathed left foot, the result of an awkward slide on a slick cobblestone during parade drill. His commanding officer had offered light medical leave. The palace offered a PR opportunity. Garron accepted both with silent reluctance. He'd never liked talking about himself, but this, they said, wasn't really about him. It was about what he stood for, what the Guards stood for. Humanize the regiment, the memo read. Not everyone in the world understands why our soldiers still stand still. Fair enough, Garron thought. But explaining 1,000 years of ceremonial honour in a studio better known for celebrity gossip seemed like a poor match. Still, orders were orders, even when disguised as invitations. His hotel room sat on the 21st floor of a midtown tower. He'd ironed his grey civilian suit 3 times with military precision. His shoes gleamed with spit polish, even though he'd been told business casual would be fine. In the mirror, he saw a man perpetually ready for inspection, even when no one was inspecting. That morning, Garron arrived at the studio lobby 15 minutes early, coat buttoned, posture square. The intern at reception blinked when she saw him, then checked his name against the schedule. "You're the British Guard guy?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. They said you might come in full gear." Her eyes betrayed disappointment. He said nothing, just nodded. She gestured toward the elevator. "Green room's on 3. He took the lift, adjusted his collar, and breathed slowly through his nose. This wasn't enemy territory, but it wasn't friendly ground either. When the lift doors opened, he straightened without thinking. Back to the wall, shoulders back, eyes ahead. The green room smelled faintly of hairspray, coffee, and nerves. A young production assistant poked at a tray of pastries with a napkin in one hand and a Bluetooth headset in the other. Lance Corporal Garron Vale took a seat in the corner, back straight, hands resting lightly on his knees. His posture drew subtle glances from other guests, a book author, a skincare founder, a social media chef, all bustling around, speaking quickly, checking their phones. Garron simply sat, eyes calm, legs squared. "You the soldier?" the assistant asked, pointing with her cup. "From Buckingham or whatever?" "Yes, ma'am," she smirked. "Hope you brought the fuzzy hat. They love that stuff." "I didn't," Garron said politely, "but I can answer questions about it." She rolled her eyes playfully and wandered off. Garron returned to stillness. The door opened again, this time with unmistakable presence. Dark sunglasses, long jacket. That deliberate walk, like the hallway, should part in her honour. Whoopi Goldberg had entered the room. Her entourage stayed back. She scanned the room briefly, then zeroed in on Garron. A small smirk tugged at her mouth. "Oh boy," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "We're doing the toy soldier thing today, huh?" Several heads turned. A couple guests chuckled uncertainly. Garron stood. "Ma'am," he said with a nod. Whoopi took a seat opposite him, legs crossed lazily, sunglasses still on. "You don't drop the act, even when the Queen's not around?" she asked, voice laced with amusement. "I don't act," Garron replied. "Ooh," she grinned, lifting her glasses slightly. "Touché." She turned to the assistant nearby. "Is this a royal PR stunt, or are we actually interviewing him?" "They just said 5 minutes in segment B," the girl replied. "It's mostly light, hat questions, history stuff." "Great," Whoopi muttered. "Royal cosplay with commentary." Another producer popped his head in. "We're live in 5. Segment A's wrapping up. Guests, stand by." People began to move. Microphones were checked. The chef practiced her opener. The skincare founder reapplied gloss. Whoopi stood and stretched. "Well, Corporal Discipline," she said dryly. "Try not to freeze mid-answer." "I'll do my best," Garron said. And he meant it. But as he followed the assistant toward the stage entrance, Garron wasn't thinking about retorts or reputation. He was thinking about his grandfather, a former grenadier. He'd once told Garron, "The crown doesn't need defenders, it needs reminders. Stand like the country's watching, because sometimes it is." The stage doors opened. Bright lights, applause cues, smiling hosts at a semicircular table, and Whoopi Goldberg sliding into her seat with a look that said she'd come prepared to laugh at everything she didn't understand. Garron didn't flinch. The theme music faded. The studio lights softened. Laughter rolled across the audience as the hosts wrapped up a segment on pet astrology. Garron stood just off camera, watching impassively. "And now," said the lead host, grinning toward camera 3, "we're joined by a very special guest. You may have seen him standing stone-faced outside Buckingham Palace or guarding Windsor Castle in that iconic red coat and towering black hat. Please welcome Lance Corporal Garron Vale of the King's Guard." Applause erupted. Garron stepped forward, posture erect, shoulders squared. No wave, no nod, just a precise step to the guest seat and a polite incline of the head to the table. "Welcome," the host said cheerily. "Thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Garron replied. "You're off duty right now, right?" another host teased. "Or do we need to salute you?" Garron offered a small smile. "No salutes necessary. I'm a guest here." Laughter from the audience. The next co-host leaned forward. "Okay, we've got to ask. Be honest, how heavy is that hat?" "About 1.5 pounds," Garron said, "but it feels heavier in the summer." "Ever sneezed on duty?" asked another. "No." "Ever wanted to?" "Often." More laughter. Garron allowed a brief smile, but his posture remained untouched. Still. Composed. Watchful. "You've stood outside in snow, in rain, in record heat," said the lead host. "What keeps you from moving?" "Tradition," Garron said simply, "and training. We're not there to react. We're there to remain." The host nodded. "Discipline, I like that." Whoopi, who had thus far remained quiet, swiveled slightly in her chair. "But seriously," she said, "what is it you do, though?" The studio quieted half a beat. "I mean," she continued, "you stand still while tourists bark in your face, right? They mock you, make TikToks, and you just take it?" A few nervous chuckles rippled across the room. Garron looked at her, then back at the host. "We stand in silence because it means something to us," he said evenly. "Yeah, but to most people watching, it's like cosplay," Whoopi said, waving a hand. "Big hats, no blinking, fancy shoes. I mean, do you guys actually guard something?" He held her gaze. "Yes." "So you'd—" "What? Stop an intruder with a glare?" Laughter erupted, louder this time. Garron didn't flinch. "We are trained soldiers," he said calmly. "We rotate from ceremonial to active duty. What you see in red is the same soldier who patrols with live rounds in a desert or trains alongside NATO." The room settled. Oh, I see, Whoopi said with a half smile. So, off camera, you're serious. On camera, you're statues. If you like, Garron said. Don't take offence, she added, smirking. It just seems outdated. The monarchy, all this ceremony, like a museum that still breathes. Garron took a breath, but said nothing. The lead host cut in quickly. Well, it's fascinating stuff. We'll hear more about the meaning behind the Guards' discipline after the break. The theme music swelled again, but the air had changed. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Whoopi wasn't done. And Garron had just begun. The cameras came back from break to a tighter frame. The lead host, still smiling, gestured warmly toward Garron. We're back with Lance Corporal Garron Vale of the King's Guard, joining us all the way from London. You've probably seen viral videos of the guards standing motionless while tourists do all kinds of things around them. But there's clearly a lot more to it. Let's talk about that, said one of the co-hosts. You've said before that the uniform isn't just costume, it's commitment. What do you mean by that? It's not the wool or the brass that carries weight, Garron replied. It's the generations behind them. Every soldier who stood before me stood for someone else's memory. That's the responsibility. There was a polite murmur of approval from the audience, a few nods around the table. A woman in the front row whispered something to her companion, who nodded respectfully. The energy had softened, become almost reverent. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. The leather creaked beneath her shift in posture. Her sunglasses were gone now, her eyes direct and unfiltered. Okay, she said, but you do know it's 2025, right? The panel fell quiet. The co-host with red glasses reached for her mug, seemingly happy for something to occupy her hands. I mean, come on. You're standing around castles while people in your own country are choosing between heat and food. You don't think the image of a silent soldier in a 19th century uniform feels a little performative? She emphasized the last word like it was an indictment. The lead host blinked. Whoopi? No, really, she said, holding up a hand to silence her colleague. Let's be honest here. You're guarding buildings that symbolize empire, class hierarchy, and centuries of inequality. Is that really something to be proud of? Her voice carried genuine curiosity beneath the challenge, as if part of her genuinely wanted to understand. Garron looked at her, calm, collected. Then he nodded slowly. Not agreement with her assessment, agreement that he'd heard her question. Yes, she raised her eyebrows. That's it? Just yes? Yes, he repeated. Because tradition isn't always about pride. Sometimes it's about remembering the price of forgetting. His voice remained even, but something in his eyes had deepened. The look of a man who had considered these questions long before a television host had posed them. That gave the panel pause. The lead host's eyebrows lifted slightly. The young male host leaned forward, genuinely interested now. Whoopi pressed again, undeterred. But don't you think it's dangerous to put so much energy into symbolism while real people are suffering? I mean, the cost of maintaining all that pageantry could feed families. Garron's voice didn't waver. His hands remained perfectly still on his knees. I don't serve symbols. I serve continuity. In crisis or in calm, people need to know something still stands where it always did. Not louder, not angrier, just steady. Something in his pronunciation of that last word, steady, carried the weight of personal conviction beyond his official role. The audience had grown noticeably quieter. A man in military-style glasses nodded unconsciously. A woman in a floral dress pressed her hand to her heart. One host smiled gently. That's actually really moving. Her voice was softer, less performative than before. Whoopi wasn't finished. She leaned forward, bracelets clinking gently. So you're telling me, if a billionaire royal does something disgraceful, you still feel good standing in that uniform? The question carried genuine interest beneath the challenge. "I don't wear the uniform for him," Garron said. His voice remained even, but carried a new directness. "I wear it for the 87-year-old widow who shows up every month to place a rose on her husband's memorial stone. I wear it for the children who see discipline before noise. And I wear it for the country, mine, not the crown." His emphasis on country carried subtle but unmistakable meaning. "Country over crown?" Whoopi asked, intrigued. Her posture had shifted slightly, less confrontational, more engaged. The performer in her recognized when a conversation had become genuine. "They're not the same," Garron said, "and they never have been." His words hung in the air, not a challenge, but a perspective that even Whoopi seemed unprepared to dismiss. That answer landed, not just on Whoopi, but in the air. The studio seemed to breathe differently. The audience leaned forward collectively, sensing that they were witnessing something beyond the usual talk show banter. This was conversation with consequence, words with weight. The host across the table gestured gently. "Corporal Vale, I think we'd all like to hear more about what this means to you personally. Is there a moment that stands out in your service?" Garron paused, glanced toward the camera, then back to Whoopi. Their eyes met directly. Not in challenge, but in a moment of unexpected mutual recognition. "May I answer that with a story?" The hosts nodded. Even Whoopi gave the faintest shrug of permission, her earlier mockery replaced by something closer to curiosity. He cleared his throat lightly, and when he began to speak again, there was no stage, only truth. "It was raining," Garron began. His voice had softened, become more intimate without losing any of its clarity. "Cold. November. I was posted outside St. James's Palace. 2-hour rotation. Not many tourists that morning, just a few commuters, some school children with umbrellas." His eyes took on a distant quality, seeing not the studio but the memory. The studio was silent. Even the cameras seemed to move more quietly, operators unwilling to disrupt the moment with mechanical noise. "I don't remember most people's faces. You don't. When you're standing still for long enough, they blur. But I remember this one man." His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on his knee, then relaxed again. He let the pause settle, not for dramatic effect, but because the memory required proper framing. The audience waited, breath collectively held. He wasn't filming, wasn't posing. No selfie stick, no phone, just watching. A worn coat, scuffed shoes, wet hair. Garron's description painted the man with precision, as if he'd catalogued every detail during those motionless hours. You see enough crowds, and you learn to spot the ones who aren't passing through. This man wasn't there to gawk. Garron's voice remained even, but something in his eyes had shifted, steadier, if anything, more present in past moments than current spotlights. He stood beside me, close, but not in the way, didn't speak, didn't smirk, just stood, shoulders back, arms at his side. I couldn't move, couldn't ask questions, but I noticed. His recitation carried the quality of testimony, factual, unembellished, yet deeply personal. He looked across the table. After about 10 minutes, he gave me a nod and walked away. Whoopi didn't interrupt. No one did. Even the floor director had stopped checking his watch. The commercial break timing suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the story unfolding. I thought that was it. Just one of those unspoken moments. Garron's eyes refocused on the present, scanning the faces at the table briefly. People have them with us sometimes, brief connections through the silence. He folded his hands lightly. But I was reassigned to a different gate the following week, and I saw him again, this time from a distance, same man, same coat, still watching. He stood quietly, nodded again, and walked on. Garron's voice carried no drama, no artificial weight, just the steady rhythm of truth. "What do you think he was doing?" one host asked softly. Her usual television brightness had dimmed to genuine wonder. "I don't know," Garron said, "but I know this. He didn't come to see a show. He came to remember something, or someone. Maybe a brother, a regiment, a time when he stood for something." His gaze turned back to Whoopi, meeting her eyes directly. That's what most people miss when they laugh at the guards. We're not there for entertainment. We're there because some things should remain steadfast, even when everything else changes. "We don't stand for kings," he said. "We stand for the invisible, the forgotten. The people who once stood tall but now have no voice. We remind them they're not lesser." Each word carried the weight of conviction earned through countless hours of silent service. You could hear a pin drop in the studio. The usual rustling of audience members shifting in seats had ceased. Even the constant tap of producers' fingernails on tablets had stopped. "I've stood for pensioners who can't walk but still salute as they pass, for children whose fathers never came home, for names carved in granite that don't get read anymore." His voice remained steady, but carried an undercurrent of emotion, not performative but authentic. He inhaled once, controlled, measured. The breath of a man who had learned that sometimes breathing itself was an act of discipline. Sometimes you don't need to speak to mean something, you just have to stay standing. A host next to Whoopi swallowed visibly. "That's actually beautiful." Her voice had shed its television polish, become simply human. Someone in the audience sniffled. A tissue appeared from a purse. Cameraman 2 wiped his eye quickly when he thought no one was looking. Even Whoopi's eyes had softened, just slightly. The performer's mask had slipped, revealing genuine connection with the unexpected depth of Garron's words. But she leaned in again. Not confrontational now, but persistent, curious about the man behind the uniform. "And you really believe that's worth it? All of it? For silence?" Garron didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't reach for practiced phrases or PR guidance. "Sometimes," he said, "silence is the loudest thing left." Whoopi sat back in her chair, arms folded loosely. The tension that had once brimmed with mockery now hung like fog, thick, uncertain, lingering. Her expression had transformed from amusement to something more complex, recognition, perhaps, or respect. "That's poetic," she said finally, her voice quieter now, "but I still don't get it." Garron's gaze didn't shift. His breathing remained steady, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The rhythm of a man who had learned that consistency itself was a kind of power. "You'd give your life," she continued, leaning forward again, "for a crown that doesn't even know your name." It wasn't mockery anymore. It was genuine curiosity. The question of someone trying to understand a world-view different from her own. A murmur moved through the audience, half gasp, half anticipation. The lead host reached for her water, perhaps preparing to intervene if needed. Garron tilted his head slightly, the only tell that the question had registered as significant. "I would never give my life for a crown," he said. The room held its breath, but I'd stand in the cold for a country that forgot how to say thank you. Silence. Then a single clap. Hesitant. From the back. Another joined, then another, and suddenly it wasn't silence anymore. The applause rolled forward like a wave, not thunderous, not theatrical, but certain, respectful, earned. Not the coached response of a television audience following light cues, but the genuine reaction of people moved beyond script. Garron didn't blink, didn't shift, just let the moment pass over him, the way he'd let centuries of traditions settle across his shoulders each morning, the way he'd stood through rain and insults and pain and exhaustion, Present without performing. Whoopi didn't say anything, not right away. She reached for her mug, realized it was empty, set it down again. Her lips parted, then closed. She glanced toward one of the co-hosts, but they didn't move to rescue her. Her eyes went back to Garron. She opened her mouth again, then exhaled and looked down. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't even agreement. It was something rarer on television. Acknowledgement. Recognition that sometimes words fail before presence. When the host tried to bring things back with a closing remark about timeless values in a changing world, the studio didn't quite follow. The energy had shifted. Not in Garron's favour or Whoopi's disfavour, but in favour of something heavier than the usual segments. Something about memory and silence, and why some people stand when everyone else sits. Garron gave a short nod when they thanked him. A co-host asked if he had any final thoughts. He said, "Thank you for having me." And that was it. Simple, direct, without flourish. The applause returned, gentle, genuine, without cue cards. The music swelled. The camera panned wide. The segment was over. But no one in that studio would forget the line that didn't just shut down Whoopi's challenge. It reminded everyone listening that dignity doesn't ask to be noticed. It simply stands. The applause faded as the cameras cut to commercial. The lights dimmed slightly, and the hum of the studio softened from performance to reality. Crew members moved quietly through the set, disconnecting microphones, coiling cables, resetting chairs. A sense of unusual reverence lingered, something rarely felt in the usually frenetic environment of daytime television. Garron stood slowly, nodding once to the hosts. No handshakes were offered, nor expected. His movements remained precise, neither hurried nor deliberate, just efficient. The same economy of motion that defined his ceremonial duties, now governing his exit from the spotlight. The lead producer stepped forward, clipboard under her arm, eyes wide with a mixture of professional assessment and personal impact. That was... wow. "Thank you, Lance Corporal Vale," he said simply. Garron Vale. His preference for his name over his rank spoke volumes to those attentive enough to notice. "Right, Mr. Vale. Really, thank you." Her voice carried the sincerity of someone who had witnessed hundreds of segments come and go, but few that had landed with such unexpected depth. He inclined his head, not quite a bow, not merely a nod. The gesture of a man for whom physical movement was its own language. A junior producer hurried over with a rolled cable in one hand and a sheepish look in the other. He was the same one who'd made the bearskin joke in the green room. His face now carried the flush of someone caught in casual mockery of something they later discovered deserved respect. "Listen," he mumbled, "about what I said earlier." "No apology needed," Garron replied. His tone suggested not magnanimity, but perspective. The understanding that casual disrespect was simply part of wearing the uniform on or off duty. The producer nodded, awkwardly grateful, and slipped away, cable still clutched too tightly in nervous hands. Behind him, Whoopi exited the stage quietly, sunglasses already on again. She didn't say a word. She didn't look back. But there was something in her posture, a slight adjustment, a fractional straightening that suggested Garron's words had registered beyond the moment. Celebrities rarely gave guards a second thought. But perhaps, for once, the guard had made someone famous reconsider their own stance. Another co-host caught up to Garron near the corridor. "You didn't flinch, not once." Her tone suggested both admiration and curiosity. "That's what we're trained for." His answer was simple, without boast. "No, I mean, not just physically. You didn't lose your cool." Her eyes sought his, wondering about the man behind the discipline. "I wasn't meant to." The host nodded slowly. "She didn't expect you to speak that well, or hit that hard." I didn't hit anyone. The faintest hint of a smile touched his lips, not amusement, but acknowledgement of her meaning. Exactly, the host smiled. And you still won. Back in the hallway, Garron retrieved his overcoat from a hook near the service elevator. He slipped it on, fastened the collar, and adjusted his posture instinctively, like he was stepping back into the courtyard at Windsor. Like the uniform was still there, invisible, but present in how he carried himself. As he turned to leave, a janitor with a mop in hand stopped him. The man had skin weathered by years of outdoor work before taking this indoor position. His eyes carried both weariness and warmth. "You're the guard, yeah?" the man asked. He spoke with a faint Caribbean accent, eyes warm. "Yes. I saw that whole thing. You made that lady eat her own words." The janitor's smile revealed a missing tooth on the left side, but genuine admiration shone in his eyes. Garron gave a slight smile. "That wasn't the goal." "Well, you did it anyway. Respect." The man extended a fist gently. Garron looked at it, then tapped his knuckles once in return. The small gesture, so casual, so human, seemed almost incongruous with his earlier formality. Yet it carried its own kind of dignity. The recognition between men who understood what it meant to stand at a post, whether guarding a palace or keeping a floor clean. The freight lift took him down to the side entrance of the building. The city outside buzzed as ever. Horns, crosswalks, flashing signs. New York's perpetual motion stood in stark contrast to the stillness Garron had cultivated as his profession. But directly across from the studio doors, a small group had gathered. Half a dozen British tourists, maybe more. Middle-aged couples with sensible coats. A young woman holding a small Union Jack that looked like it had been purchased from a souvenir shop. An elderly man with a military service pin on his lapel. They had clearly been waiting. One woman clapped quietly as he stepped outside. A man touched his chest in a small salute. No shouting, no chanting. Just a kind of reverence that's born from pride, not spectacle. Garron didn't wave and didn't smile wide. He simply straightened the hem of his coat, adjusted the lapels, and began to walk. Measured, focused. Like the cameras were still rolling, even though the world wasn't watching anymore, because that was the point. The duty didn't stop just because the interview had. It never did. And Garron Vale, royal guard, soldier, servant of tradition, was never really off duty. Not in posture, not in purpose, not in principle. Should royal guards ever have to explain themselves to outsiders? Did Garron handle that interview the right way, or should he have walked off? What would you have said if you were in that studio? Drop your answers in the comments. We read every one of them. If this story moved you, like the video and subscribe for more powerful Royal Guard moments. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss our daily uploads. And share this video with someone who still believes tradition deserves respect. Our other stories should be on your screen now. Go check them out, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time with another brand new story.